It began on a quiet silver morning inside the shining halls of the Galactic Council, where polished floors reflected the light of distant suns and banners of 100 species hung from ceilings so high they looked like the sky itself. And in that peaceful glow, diplomats whispered about treaties, alliances, taxes, borders, everything that made the galaxy feel stable even when everyone secretly feared war. Humans had joined the Council only 30 years earlier, and many old empires still looked at them like children. Too emotional, too loud, too soft, too human. They mocked Earth's history of kindness, its habit of rescuing strangers, its strange loyalty to family above empire. So when a young man in a black suit walked calmly through the council gates, no one reacted. They saw a human boy, nothing more. They didn't know that his eyes weren't soft at all. They didn't know he moved like a man who had walked through fire before. They didn't know the suit he wore wasn't simple fabric but a thin layer of hidden Terran tech designed by a program the galaxy didn't even know existed. His name was Aiden Ward, and he had come to deliver a diplomatic message on behalf of his father, Earth's ambassador. His steps were slow, steady, quiet, but there was a weight behind them, like he was carrying something unseen. He walked past tall statues of ancient emperors, past the swirling holograms of star maps, past guards in heavy armor who barely glanced at him. How could they know that this quiet human was anything but ordinary? How could they guess that each step he took was monitored by a silent network of Terran satellites hidden behind Jupiter? How could they know that inside his chest beat the calm, controlled pulse of someone trained to fight shadows in the dark? Aiden approached the council reception platform, ready to deliver the message, when 6 armed guards appeared from behind the pillars, blocking his path. Their armor gleamed like ice under the blue lights. Their helmets hid their faces, but their voices sounded sharp and proud. "Human, you are under arrest by order of the Council Security Directive." Aiden didn't blink. He didn't step back. He didn't even look confused. He simply looked at them with those steady, unreadable eyes. The guards expected fear. They expected panic. They expected him to beg, because that's what many species did when confronted by the Council Guard. But Aiden only lifted his hands slowly, calmly, as if he were already expecting this. He looked each guard in the eye, and for the first time a ripple of discomfort ran through them. His voice was soft, almost gentle, but it carried an edge sharper than any blade as he whispered 4 words that made the air feel suddenly colder. "You should not have." Those words should have warned them. Those words should have stopped them. But arrogance is louder than fear. The guards laughed. They stepped closer. One guard grabbed Aiden's arm roughly and slapped metallic restraints on his wrists. The others stood around him, mocking Earth, mocking humanity, mocking his father. Aiden didn't move. He didn't resist. He didn't show anger. That worried the oldest guard, though he didn't understand why. There was something very wrong about a prisoner who didn't fear anything. The guards dragged him away, his shoes gliding silently across the polished floor. Council diplomats stopped talking. Some stared. Some smirked. Some whispered to each other, saying things like finally putting humans in their place and Earth has been getting too bold lately. They didn't understand the truth. They didn't realize Aiden wasn't a normal human diplomat's son. They didn't know about the Black Wing program, Earth's most secret unit, created for wars the galaxy never recorded. Blackwing children were trained in silence, precision, survival, diplomacy, and shadow warfare. They were taught to look harmless until the moment they struck. They were taught to feel no panic, no hesitation, no fear when caught. They were taught to wait. Aiden had been waiting his whole life. As the guards walked him deeper into the council's detention wing, they joked about how Earth would scream for the boy's return. They joked that humans cried easily. They joked that Earth had no power here in the center of alien authority. But Aiden walked quietly, eyes half-lidded, like he could already see the future written on the walls. The halls grew darker as they descended the spiraling corridor, passing thicker doors, heavier walls, and scanners that flickered nervously when Aiden walked by. Something in him interfered with the sensors, but the guards ignored it. They pushed him into a cold cell made of black stone and shimmering locks. A single dim light shone on the ceiling. The air tasted metallic. Most prisoners cried in this room. Aiden didn't sit. He stood in the center, posture straight, like he was waiting for someone to join him. The lead guard stepped close and smirked. "You are far from home, little human. Your people can't protect you here." Aiden lifted his head slowly, eyes calm, voice steady as he said, "You are wrong. They're already here." The guard scoffed. "No one is coming for you." "They already know," Aiden whispered. "You made a mistake." And in that moment, far beyond the tall towers of the council, beyond the busy trade lanes, beyond the peaceful stars, a silent signal flicked across the void of space. It was so small, so quiet, so fast that no scanner caught it. Not even the most advanced alien systems. But Earth caught it. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, inside a Terran intelligence bunker known as the Abyss, a single red light began to blink. A siren that hadn't sounded in 20 years came to life. Blackwing asset COMPOMASED across Earth's defense network. Silent alarms spread. Satellites adjusted. Codes activated. Secure doors opened. Generals jolted from meetings. Admirals rushed to silent war rooms. Earth's Diplomat, Aiden's father, received the alert while addressing a humanitarian conference. His face drained of color. His speech froze on his tongue. The world around him blurred as he read the message again and again. His son. His only child. His Blackwing asset taken by the council. That he whispered, "Oh no, they don't understand what they've done." Because the galaxy was used to threatening leaders for leverage. They were used to taking hostages. They were used to scaring weak species. But humans were different. Humans didn't abandon their own. Humans didn't negotiate for family. Aiden stood in his cell, eyes half closed, completely calm, as if listening to music only he could hear. He knew Earth had received his signal. He knew the response would be silent and absolute. While the guards mocked him, saying Earth would apologize and beg, Aiden simply breathed slowly, counting his heartbeat, waiting for the moment the galaxy always feared but never believed would come. N01 in the council knew what Blackwing assets were trained for. N01 knew they had just declared war. Not with weapons. Not with ships. But with a mistake so simple and deadly, they touched the wrong human. Aiden stood silently in the cold detention cell as the metallic hum of the locks echoed around him, but his face held the same calm expression he wore entering the council gates, and what the guards could not understand, what they could not even recognize, was that Aiden was not afraid because fear had never been part of his training. Blackwing children learned early that fear was a shadow you sliced through, not something you bowed to. The guards paced outside the cell, bragging about how they would teach Earth a lesson, laughing loudly as if trying to bury their own uneasiness. Yet every time they looked at Aiden's still figure, something in their stomach twisted because no prisoner acted like this. No hostage stood without trembling. No son of a diplomat stared at the floor as if he were listening to a distant heartbeat only he could feel. Across the galaxy on Earth, the red alert for Aiden spread faster than fire, reaching deep into military bunkers, hidden intelligence stations, and forgotten fleets sleeping behind frozen moons. Admirals rose from their chairs, technicians froze mid-sentence, commanders exchanged glances filled with the kind of fear only humans understood, the fear that comes before rage. Aiden's father, Ambassador Ward, sat in a soundproof room with diplomats from 12 species when his personal device vibrated once. A single pulse, the signal he prayed he would never see. His breath caught. His chest tightened. He whispered, "Aiden," as his hand trembled around the screen. The other diplomats asked if he was all right, but he didn't answer. He only stood, spine straightening with a cold resolve that made every species present instinctively step aside. Because humans, when they stood like that, when their eyes went empty and sharp at the same time, carried a presence that felt older than war, older than space, older than the galaxy itself. Council headquarters, however, remained blind to what they had done. They were too busy celebrating their own brilliance, too excited that they had a tool to bend Earth's political will, too arrogant to see the shadow moving toward them. In the detention wing, the youngest guard grew uneasy and stepped closer to the cell, staring at Aiden with narrow eyes as he asked, "What are you waiting for?" Aiden slowly lifted his head, and the look he gave the guard was not anger, not fear, not hatred, just pity, soft and cold, the kind that made the guard step back involuntarily. Aiden whispered, barely audible, "For you to understand." "Understand what?" the guard snapped. trying to hide the tremor in his voice. Aiden blinked once, eyes darkening. That I am not alone. Before the guard could respond, the lights flickered, not like normal power fluctuations, but like something breathing inside the wires. The council's security system made a sharp clicking sound as every door on the cell block locked automatically, even the ones the guards used. A cold mechanical voice echoed through the hallway. External signal detected. Unknown access. The guards panicked, running to control panels, slamming buttons, shouting orders that the system ignored because their commands were no longer recognized. Aiden watched them quietly, almost sadly, because he knew the moment Earth received his distress signal, the Black Wing response protocol began to move. On a hidden outpost near Titan, men and women wearing black suits identical to Aiden's lined up in silence as a steel door slid open, revealing a dormant warship, blacker than shadow, older than the Council, filled with classified human technology. The ship's engines lit with a soft blue glow as if waking from a long sleep. Its name, written in tiny letters almost invisible to the alien eye, shimmered for the first time in years. Ghost 01. In the detention block, alarms blared as the Council realized something was entering their restricted airspace. A ship with no origin, no ID, no signal, nothing for scanners to read. The guards shook Aiden violently, yelling, "What have you done?" But Aiden simply tilted his head, hair falling into his eyes, and whispered, "Your mistake was touching me." Panic filled the hallway as the guards shouted into their comms for reinforcements. The comms only responded with static. Aiden's restraints clicked softly and fell to the floor like they were never locked. The guards froze, horrified. That's impossible," one whispered. Aiden stepped forward, slow and controlled, and his voice softened into something almost sorrowful as he said, "You thought Earth was weak. You thought humans were alone. You thought hurting me would scare my people." His eyes lifted, and for the first time, the guards saw something behind those calm human eyes. Something sharp, something ancient, something that didn't belong in a diplomat's child. Aiden continued, "Humans do not run. Humans do not hide. Humans do not abandon their own." The lights went dark completely. Only Aiden's voice remained. And now the galaxy will learn what that truly means. Darkness filled the detention wing like a living creature, swallowing every corner of the hallway, and for a moment the guards stood frozen, unable to breathe, unable to think, as if the air itself had thickened with something cold and wrong, something that didn't belong in the heart of the Galactic Council. Aiden stood perfectly still, his silhouette barely visible in the flickering emergency lights, but there was a quiet strength radiating from him. Steady, controlled, terrifying in its calmness. The youngest guard stumbled backward, whispering, "What is happening?" But he didn't want the answer because deep inside his chest, beneath all the training and arrogance, he felt the truth. The Council had taken something they were never meant to touch. Outside the Council Tower, the shadows above the sky began to shift as the Ghost 01 slipped silently into orbit, its black hull swallowing light like a hole in space. No alarms detected it, no scanners marked it, nothing acknowledged its presence except the sudden, sharp panic that spread through the Council's internal senses like a silent scream. Aiden closed his eyes for a moment, his breathing slow, steady, almost peaceful, like he was aligning himself with a frequency only humans could hear. In the darkness, the thin black fibers of his suit shifted slightly, reacting to signals from the Ghost, connecting him to Earth intelligence as if an invisible thread tied his heart to every human soldier preparing to move. In distant sectors, Terran outposts went into lockdown, old war protocols activated, emergency codes whispered through hidden channels, and every person who knew Aiden felt a pain in their chest, a pain made of guilt, fear, anger, and something stronger. They remembered the boy who grew up learning 10 languages before age 10, the boy who trained blindfolded on moving platforms, the boy who could charm diplomats during the day and dismantle weapons at night. Aiden Ward was not just the son of a diplomat. He was the child of a program designed to protect humanity when diplomacy failed. And somewhere deep inside a Terran command bunker, his father stood trembling as he stared at the hologram of his son's vital signs, whispering, "Hold on, Aiden, we're coming." Back in the detention block, the guards tried to regain control, slamming their hands on locked panels, shouting into dead comms, demanding backup that would never arrive in time. Aiden stepped forward, and the soft sound of his shoe touching the metal floor echoed louder than the alarms because it wasn't the step of a hostage. It was the step of someone who had already accepted what would happen next. His voice cut through the darkness, calm but heavy with something deeper, something painful and powerful. "You think you arrested me," he said softly, "but what you really did was summon them." The guards didn't understand at first, but then the cell block doors, all 40 of them, began to unlock one by one, not opening, just unlocking, like a quiet warning. The guards' hearts pounded as the locks clicked in perfect rhythm. One guard backed into a wall and whispered, This is impossible." Aiden looked at him with a kind of sad respect, as if he was looking at someone moments before a storm hit. "Humans don't abandon their own," he said, "not diplomats, not soldiers, not children. You think my father is sending requests to negotiate?" He shook his head slowly. "No. He's sending the one thing Earth never uses unless there is no other choice." The guards swallowed hard, their voices cracking. What thing?" Aiden met their eyes, and for the first time since his arrest, there was emotion in his expression. Not anger, not fear, but something cold and fierce like a promise. "A silent fleet." As if triggered by his words, a distant rumble vibrated through the floor. Not loud, not destructive, just enough to make the guards freeze again. Aiden didn't move. "You felt that," he murmured. "The galaxy always feels the first arrival." The guards looked at each other with growing horror as a second vibration followed, then a third, each one stronger than the last, like a heartbeat spreading through the entire structure. Outside the council's transparent dome, shadows began to appear. Huge outlines of ships that weren't supposed to exist. Ships without markings, ships without lights, ships with signatures erased so thoroughly that not even the council's oldest archives recognized them. The first ship completed its glide into position, and the council's defense officers stared at their screens in disbelief as the massive vessel seemed to merge with the darkness, shaped like a spear aimed at their hearts. Aiden lowered his voice to a whisper. "Black Wing." The guards froze. Even the bravest among them felt something wet on their palms, sweat of fear. Because only one species in the galaxy could make warships vanish from every scanner. Only one species used the vacuum of silence as their battle cry. Only one species fought like ghosts and protected like wolves. Aiden stepped closer to the bars, eyes glowing faintly from the suit's hidden tech. "You didn't just arrest a human," he said. "You arrested the wrong human." The floor shook again. The alarms died completely. Every light went out. Darkness swallowed everything. And the guards finally understood the truth. The galaxy had mocked humans for being emotional, gentle, soft. But now they would learn what humans became when someone touched the ones they loved. The blackout inside the detention block deepened until it felt like the air itself had turned heavy, thick, and alive, pressing against the guards' chests as panic crept through their bones. And even though none of them could see Aiden clearly, they could feel him, standing calmly in the center of the dark like a storm waiting to break. The youngest guard's breath came in short, sharp gasps, and he whispered to the older one, Why isn't he afraid?" But before the words settled, a thin beam of red emergency light sputtered to life above them, painting the hallway in long shadows that moved like ghosts. Aiden lifted his head slowly, the faint red glow sharpening the edges of his face, giving him a calm yet terrifying presence that made even the most hardened guard take a step back. "This isn't fear," Aiden said softly. "This is a countdown." The guards did not understand, but the floor did, because it vibrated again, stronger than before, not like machinery or weapons, but like something enormous shifting its weight in the void. High above the council tower, the silent Terran fleet continued to arrive, ship after ship drifting out of warp with a grace that looked almost supernatural, their black hulls absorbing the starlight, their engines barely whispering as they positioned themselves around the planet like predators circling wounded prey. On the council's main bridge, officers scrambled to make sense of the situation, shouting over each other as scanners returned nothing. The ships were there, clearly visible by eye, but every detection system insisted the space around the council was empty. One officer whispered, shaking, "They're invisible." Another corrected him, voice cracking, "No, they're worse. They are beyond detection." Meanwhile, in the detention block, The guards tried to call for reinforcements again, but their comms only hissed with static, the frequencies hijacked by a soft rhythmic pulse. 6 beats, then a pause, then 6 beats again, the signature of a black wing infiltration. Aiden heard the pattern and exhaled slowly, the corner of his mouth curling in the faintest hint of relief. "They're inside," he murmured. The guards whipped around in fear, pointing their weapons at the shadows, their eyes darting from corner to corner. But the Black Wing operatives were already moving through the council complex. Silent as smoke, fast as thought, leaving no footprints, no sound, nothing except the sudden flicker of lights where they passed. As the guards panicked, Aiden stepped closer to the force field of his cell, the red glow catching the sharp lines of his suit. His voice softened, but it carried a weight that made the air tighten. "My father warned the galaxy, you don't threaten a human child." One guard snapped, "You think we're afraid of Earth?" Aiden tilted his head slightly, sorrow mixing with something deeper, something darker. "No," he answered. "You're afraid of what Earth becomes when someone forces our hand." Above them, far above the shining towers, the biggest ship emerged, the Ghost itself, its hull rippling with defensive layers that shimmered like liquid shadow, its massive silhouette blotting out entire constellations. The council officers stared at their screens in horror as the ship cast a dark shape over their capital world. One officer whispered, "If they fire, we're finished." "They won't fire," another replied, voice hollow. "Humans only fire when the innocent are threatened." "We are the innocent," someone argued desperately. The commander shook his head slowly. "We took their child." Inside the detention block, Aiden's restraints dissolved into dust as the Ghost signaled the final phase of the extraction. The guards backed away, pointing weapons at him, their voices shaking. "Stay where you are." Aiden stepped forward, his movements slow, patient, like a teacher guiding frightened children. "If they wanted you dead," he said quietly, "you wouldn't even know it was happening." His words sank deep into the guards' chests, colder than ice, because they knew it was true. Black Wing didn't make threats. Black Wing made disappearances. A distant boom echoed through the floor, not an explosion, but the sound of the Council's outer shields collapsing under the pressure of Terran quantum disruptors, the kind of weaponry the galaxy believed humans were too weak to create. Then came another sound, soft, measured footsteps. The guards turned toward the hallway, weapons raised, hearts pounding. The footsteps grew louder, steady, unhurried. Not running, not sneaking, walking, confident, controlled. The kind of walk that belonged to someone who did not fear death. Suddenly, the emergency lights flickered again, revealing the silhouettes of 3 figures emerging from the shadows. Tall, masked, wearing the same black suit as Aiden, their movements so precise they looked unreal. The guards froze. One masked operative tapped the force field. It dropped instantly. Aiden stepped out, and the lead operative nodded once, as if greeting an equal, not a prisoner. "Asset secured," the masked figure said, voice low and metallic. "Extraction begins." Aiden looked at the terrified guards one last time, sadness in his eyes. Not hatred, not anger, just a quiet sorrow that they had forced this situation. His voice was soft, almost compassionate. This didn't have to happen. The guards didn't reply. They couldn't. Because the truth hit them harder than any weapon. The galaxy had mocked humanity for their emotions, for their loyalty, for their compassion. But today, they would learn that compassion, when violated, becomes the most dangerous force in the universe. The hallway outside the detention block shook as the Blackwing operatives moved forward with Aiden between them, their silent steps cutting through the cold metallic floor like blades slicing through still water, and the guards, once proud, once confident, pressed themselves against the walls, their hands trembling so violently on their weapons that even the guns seemed afraid to be held. Aiden walked calmly, almost gently, his eyes soft with a strange sadness that confused the guards even more because he wasn't angry, he wasn't laughing, he wasn't threatening them. He was simply walking like someone who had accepted a burden too big for one person to carry, and that quiet emotion was more terrifying than any weapon. The council lights flickered as Black Wing infiltrators disabled systems with surgical precision, not harming anyone, not breaking anything more than they must, just shutting down every defense with a grace that felt unreal, as if the shadows themselves obeyed them. Aiden's heartbeat synced with the soft pulses in his suit. The ghost's remote signals guiding him, protecting him, wrapping him in an invisible shield of human loyalty and rage. As he walked, memories surfaced. His father teaching him diplomacy in warm earth sunlight. His instructors teaching him how to breathe through panic, how to stay calm when surrounded, how to remain human even when the world wanted him to become a weapon. And now, as alarms fell silent around him, he felt those lessons collide inside his chest like two storms meeting in the sky. Aiden didn't want blood on these walls. He didn't want death in these halls. He didn't want war. But he also knew war had already begun the moment the council touched him. The masked Black Wing operative nearest him whispered, 3 minutes until extraction. And Aiden nodded once, his expression tightening with the weight of what was coming next. Far above them, inside the council's main chamber, ambassadors shouted at one another in panic, accusing humans of aggression, demanding explanations, calling for shields that no longer existed. Their voices roar with fear as the dark shapes of Terran ships drifted closer like wolves surrounding a flock of frightened animals. In the chaos, the council chancellor screamed, "Why are the humans doing this?" But deep down they all knew. They had taken a child, not understanding that humans were a pack species. A species that fought for each other. A species that rose together. A species that could turn soft hearts into iron when someone they loved was threatened. As Aiden reached the central elevator shaft, the entire structure groaned as the ghost latched onto the outside of the council tower, its gravity anchors digging in with a sound like thunder rolling through metal mountains. The guards near the elevator collapsed to the floor, some sobbing, some praying in languages older than their sons. Aiden looked at them, not with anger but with a kind of tired compassion, as he whispered, "This is your last warning. Stand down." One guard, shaking violently, cried out, "Why would Earth go this far for you? You're just a diplomat, son." Aiden's eyes softened even more, and the sadness in his voice wrapped around them like fog. "I am not important because of who my father is. I am important because I am human." The guards didn't understand, but the Blackwing operatives did. They had lived their entire lives under the weight of that truth. When the elevator doors opened, revealing a vertical tunnel with lights dimming one by one, Aiden stepped inside, and the operatives followed. As they ascended toward the extraction point, the view outside the glass panels widened, revealing the full Terran fleet. Hundreds of ships in perfect silent formation, each one dark as night, each one ready to burn or save at a moment's notice. Aiden felt his chest tighten with something indescribable, something like grief mixed with pride, something like love mixed with responsibility. "They came for me," he whispered. The lead operative answered softly, "We always do." The elevator slowed as it reached the roof. The final lock released. Aiden stepped out into the open air of the council tower, wind rushing past him as the massive shadow of the ghost lowered toward the landing platform like a god descending from the sky. The council forces who had gathered on the rooftop dropped their weapons one by one, unable to aim at a boy who walked with such calm sorrow, unable to stand against a fleet that radiated an emotion the galaxy never understood, human loyalty. The ghost's ramp opened, blue lights glowing like a heartbeat. Aiden paused at the edge of the platform and turned back to the guards, his voice steady, quiet, almost gentle as he said, "This is not war. This is retrieval." And in that moment, every species watching finally understood. Humans didn't come to conquer, humans came because someone they loved was taken. And there was no force in the galaxy stronger than that. The ghost's ramp lowered with a soft mechanical sigh, the blue lights reflecting off Aiden's face like moonlight on water, and as he stepped toward it the wind around the council rooftop shifted, slow at first, then stronger, almost like the entire sky was bending under the weight of what was happening. And every alien soldier standing on the roof felt their hearts pounding so hard it hurt because they were witnessing something the galaxy had never seen before. A human child walking toward a warship built from secrecy, loyalty, and grief. Aiden's shoes touched the metal ramp, but before he could take another step, a deep tremor shook the entire tower. The sound of the Council's emergency fleet arriving too late, their ships roaring into the atmosphere in a desperate attempt to contain the humans. But compared to the silent Terran fleet above them, the Council ships looked like frightened birds flying into a hurricane. Aiden turned slightly, watching as the council commanders barked orders into their comms, trying to form defensive formations. But their voices cracked with fear because every time they aimed their weapons at the ghost, the ship didn't react. Didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge them. As if their strongest firepower was nothing more than dust floating in the wind. The masked Blackwing operative beside Aiden placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and warm, and whispered, "Stay close. They're going to panic." And they did. The council flagship fired a warning shot. The beam sizzled through the air like a line of lightning, but the moment it touched the ghost's hull, it vanished, absorbed, consumed, erased as if it never existed. Gasps echoed across the rooftop. Down below, entire districts paused in terror. The council commanders froze, eyes wide, hands shaking over their controls. Aiden looked at them with a soft, heartbreaking expression, not prideful, not cruel, but filled with a quiet disappointment that made the moment feel infinitely heavier. "You shouldn't have done that," he whispered, and the ghost responded to his voice, not by attacking but by activating its shield layers, creating a shimmering field around Aiden and the operatives that made the council soldiers lower their weapons involuntarily, their instincts screaming that firing again would be suicide. Far across the council city, civilians gathered along the balconies and streets, staring up at the sky, watching as Terran warships hovered silently above their capital like giants made of night, and fear spread through the crowds, not hatred, not anger, but a deep, ancient fear born not from threat but from the unknown power of a species they had all underestimated. In the council chamber, the ambassadors argued wildly, screaming that Earth was declaring war, accusing humanity of aggression, calling for retaliation, until an emergency broadcast lit up every screen in the room. Live footage of Aiden walking up the ramp of the ghost, surrounded by operatives who moved with the precision of ghosts and the stillness of statues. The ambassadors fell silent, their faces pale as moonstone. Aiden had not come as a prisoner. He was leaving as something much more, something the council never intended to create. A symbol. A symbol of human unity. A symbol of human resolve. A symbol of what happens when you hurt someone humanity loves. Back on the rooftop, as Aiden reached the center of the ramp, an alien officer finally broke under the pressure and shouted, "Stop. Please. Tell your people we are not your enemy." The desperation in his voice made Aiden pause. He looked over his shoulder, eyes gentle, voice soft like calm rain. "Then why did you take me?" The officer opened his mouth, but no answer came, because there was no explanation that could excuse what they had done. And Aiden knew it. Everyone did. "We didn't know who you were," the officer whispered. Aiden nodded slowly. "And now you do." The wind grew colder. The sky darkened as the ghost adjusted position, casting a shadow so wide that the entire council tower seemed to shrink beneath it. Aiden took one more step forward, the blue lights washing over him until his black suit shone like armor. But before he entered the ship fully, he looked back at the terrified soldiers and spoke one final sentence that made their hearts stop. "Humans don't start wars. But we finish danger." Then he disappeared into the ghost, and the ramp lifted behind him with a soft, final clang. The sound of a chapter closing, the sound of a galaxy holding its breath. The ghost began to rise, slow and smooth, its engines barely audible, and every alien watching felt a deep, unshakable truth settle into their bones. The humans were leaving peacefully, but the message they delivered would scar the stars for centuries. The ghost rose into the storm-dark sky with Aiden inside, and the moment the ship cleared the council rooftop, a deep silence fell across the entire capital world. A silence so heavy it felt as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. Because every species watching, through windows, through broadcasts, through trembling eyes, understood that something irreversible had just happened, something the galaxy had never prepared for. On the ground, the council soldiers lowered their weapons slowly, their hands shaking as they watched the massive Terran ship ascend with calm, terrifying grace, its hull absorbing the light like a living shadow. Inside the council chamber, ambassadors stood frozen around the central table, their voices gone, their arguments dead, as the live footage showed Aiden stepping deeper into the ghost. No longer a prisoner, no longer a bargaining tool, but a quiet, unstoppable symbol of human strength. The Chancellor's voice trembled as she whispered, "What have we done?" But the words were far too late, because the Ghost was already reaching orbit where hundreds of Terran ships waited, arranged with such perfect discipline that the formation looked like a single enormous eye staring down at the capital with cold judgment. Aiden reached the command bridge, greeted by human operatives whose faces softened with relief at the sight of him. But even as they hugged him, checked him, protected him, their eyes held a shadow of pain, because every one of them knew the message this rescue would send across the galaxy. Aiden's father appeared on the holo screen, his face lined with worry and something deeper, something like guilt. "Aiden," he whispered, voice breaking, "are you hurt?" Aiden shook his head slowly, and the sight made the diplomat exhale a shaky breath, pressing his hand over his heart. But then his expression hardened, sharpened, until he no longer looked like a diplomat at all, but like something older and fiercer. "They touched my son," he said quietly, and every Terran officer in the room bowed their head, not in fear, but in respect, because humanity understood family like no other species did. And this moment would be written into Earth's history as the day the galaxy crossed a line that should have never existed. On the planet below, the Council fleets attempted to form a defensive ring, their ships trembling under the gravitational pressure of the Terran armada. Aiden watched the Council screens showing chaotic commands, desperate cries, frantic attempts to regain control. He watched soldiers who had mocked him hours earlier now staring up at the sky with terror in their eyes. And yet, he felt no joy in their fear, only sadness, deep and heavy, because he knew the truth. Humans were not here to conquer. They were not here to punish. They were not here to destroy. They were here because someone had taken a human child. His voice was soft when he stepped forward, addressing the entire Council capital through an open channel, his words echoing across cities, starports, and the very halls where he had been arrested. "This is not an attack," Aiden said, his voice steady like calm thunder. "This is a reminder." The Council chamber erupted with whispers, but no one dared interrupt him. "Humans do not abandon our own," Aiden continued. "Not diplomats. Not soldiers. Not children. Not anyone." His eyes softened, not with weakness but with the unbearable weight of truth. "You did not understand that," he said, "and now the galaxy will learn." The camera zoomed out, showing the full Terran fleet behind him, silent, vast, unbreakable, and the Council ambassadors felt their knees weaken as the scope of human strength finally became clear. Not strength of weapons. Not strength of armies. Strength of loyalty. Strength of unity. Strength of heart. Aiden stepped closer to the holofeed. "We are leaving," he said gently, "but do not confuse our mercy with weakness." Then his expression sharpened, and the tone of his voice dropped into something cold enough to freeze entire suns. "If you ever touch a human again, any human, diplomacy will not be who comes next." A soft hum filled the Ghost, like a sleeping beast stirring. "We will." The broadcast cut. The Council chamber collapsed into chaos. Aiden turned away from the screen, exhaling slowly as a strange, quiet peace filled his chest, not because he wanted revenge, but because he had finally spoken the truth his species had carried for generations. The Ghost began to rotate, its engines brightening as it prepared for the Terran fleet jump, and as the ship aligned with its sister vessels, the entire armada shifted together like a single living organism, silent, united, terrifyingly disciplined. Down on the capital, civilians watched in stunned silence as the sky filled with human ships, not firing, not attacking, simply leaving with the kind of power only a species with nothing to prove could show. One alien child tugged his mother's hand and whispered, "Mama, are humans heroes or monsters?" The mother's voice shook. "Both," she whispered. "And that is why they are strong." A final pulse of light spread across the sky as the Terran fleet jumped into the void, leaving behind only quiet air, trembling hearts, and a galaxy forever changed. For the first time in history, every species understood that humans were not weak, not small, not fragile. They were something far more dangerous and far more beautiful. They were loyal. They were united. They were unstoppable, and the galaxy would never forget it. The Terran fleet vanished into the deep void with a final flash of silent blue light, leaving the Galactic Council world trembling beneath a sky that suddenly felt too large, too empty, too quiet, and in that crushing silence every species on the planet realized they had survived not because they were strong, not because they were righteous, but but because humans had chosen mercy over destruction. Down in the council chamber, ambassadors slumped into their chairs like broken statues, their pride shattered, their voices gone, their faces pale as they replayed Aiden's message again and again, each repetition sinking deeper into their bones like a warning carved in fire. Do not touch a human again. Some trembled. Some cried. Some stared blankly at the screen where Aiden's calm face had appeared, trying to understand how a single human child, just one boy, could summon a force so powerful that even the oldest empires felt like dust beneath it. The Chancellor pressed her hands to her face, whispering shakily, "We made enemies of the wrong species." But no one corrected her, because they all felt the same truth echoing inside their chests. Humans weren't their enemies. They were something far more frightening. They were protectors. They were guardians with gentle hands and unbreakable hearts. And when you harmed even one of their own, they became something the galaxy had no name for. Above the council tower, people gathered in the open plazas, staring at the empty sky where the Terran fleet had hovered moments before, and an eerie ripple of emotion spread through the crowd. Fear, yes, but also awe, gratitude, and an unfamiliar respect, because they had seen firsthand that humans didn't come with hunger for power or desire for conquest. They came with love, loyalty, and a fierce devotion the galaxy had never understood. One alien elder whispered to her granddaughter, "Remember this day. Remember the humans. They are small only in size, not in soul." Meanwhile, far across the stars, the Terran fleet traveled in perfect formation, the Ghost leading the way like an ancient phantom guiding its pack home. Inside the Ghost's command deck, Aiden stood quietly beside the viewing window, watching the stars streak past like falling silver rain, and despite the calm around him, his heart was heavy with the weight of what had happened. He didn't want fear. He didn't want power. All he had wanted was to deliver a message and return home. And yet, the galaxy had turned that simple act into a spark capable of igniting civilizations. The Blackwing operatives stood around him with silent respect, their normally unreadable faces softening because they understood the burden he carried. They had all carried it before, being the symbol of a species who loved too deeply and fought too fiercely to ever be underestimated again. The ship's captain approached Aiden gently, her voice low. "You handled yourself with honor," she said. Aiden nodded, but his eyes were distant. "I didn't want anyone to be scared." The captain sighed softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "They're not scared of you," she said. "They are scared of what they did to you, and of how humans answer injustice." Aiden looked down at the dark floor, the reflection of the stars shimmering at his feet like broken pieces of light. "Will the galaxy hate us now?" he asked quietly. "Some will," the captain admitted. "But many, many more will understand. You didn't bring destruction today. You brought truth." Behind them, a holoscreen blinked alive, showing thousands of transmissions flooding council channels. Messages from smaller species thanking humanity for showing strength where the council showed cruelty. Messages from colonies asking for human protection. Messages from children drawing pictures of Terran ships keeping them safe. Aiden's eyes widened as he read them, and something warm, soft, and painful rose inside his chest. A mixture of relief, sorrow, and hope. "We didn't start this," he whispered. "But we finished it the only way humans know how." The captain nodded. With heart. On Earth, Ambassador Ward waited near the landing platform at the Terran embassy, his hands shaking, his breath shallow, his eyes searching the dark sky for the first glimpse of the Ghost's returning silhouette. When the warship finally descended, engines humming like a lullaby, the Diplomat's composure broke, and tears rolled down his face as the ramp opened. Aiden walked out slowly, exhaustion in his steps, but alive, whole, safe. His father ran to him, pulling him into a fierce embrace that made everyone watching swallow hard. "I thought I lost you," the Diplomat whispered against his son's hair. Aiden closed his eyes. "You came for me." His father's voice trembled. "We always will." The gathered Terran officers bowed their heads in respect, not to power, not to rank, but to the bond between a father and son that had shaken the galaxy awake. News of the event spread across every system, through every star lane, through every whispering crowd. And as the galaxy watched humans hold each other, comfort each other, protect each other, A truth settled into every mind like a slow sunrise breaking over a dark world. Humans were not dangerous because of their weapons. They were dangerous because of their love. Dangerous because of their loyalty. Dangerous because of their refusal to abandon their own. The galaxy had finally seen humanity's true strength. And from that day on, no one ever touched a human child again. Not out of fear but out of respect.